Good evening, everyone. And tá fáilte roimh go léir go dtí an ambasáide nacht. My name is Dan Mulhall. I'm the ambassador here and therefore the host of this evening's event. It's a particular pleasure for me to host this event because it's exactly in my area of enthusiasm. This is the books that are being launched here this evening and the topics that are being addressed are absolutely grist to the middle for me. If I had a choice of career, I probably would be doing something other than this. But no, I'm delighted and I'm honoured to be ambassador. But if it hadn't been for the accident of my ending up in the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1978, expecting to stay for a year, hadn't been for the accident of the fact that it turned out that diplomacy suited me quite well, and I ended up turning it into a life's activity, I probably would have ended up somehow involved in literary history or literary historical studies, and it's always a pleasure to be involved, and I really enjoyed going to St. Mary's a few weeks back for the talk that I gave on Shaun. Thank you very much for that invitation. It's great to be able to do that, and I look forward to having further connection with St. Mary's in the months and years ahead. I want to also pay tribute to the fact that we are very fortunate as a country that all over the world there are people who have an interest in Ireland and in Irish studies. And I've been in various places over the years during my career around the world, and it's been great to meet people who have a passionate dedication to Irish studies. And it's great that here in Britain in particular we have St. Mary's and other places where Irish studies is pursued in a very serious way and taught to a very high level. That is a great advantage for Ireland, because the most likely fate for a small country is to be ignored, and nobody ever knows who you are, and you'll get, nobody ever thinks about you, nobody ever takes any notice of you. But in Ireland, because of our cultural strengths, that can't happen to us, because there's so many things about Ireland people are interested in being involved in and being enthusiastic about. So I remember over the years the poster that always, at embassies where I've been, the poster that always generates the most interest is the poster which has the photographs of all the great Irish writers. And people usually sort of stand around and go, no, they were Irish and so on. I remember this in Berlin many, many times, watching groups of Germans at the embassy looking at these and saying, I didn't realise they were Irish, So that's one of the things that we have as a country. And it's great that we have people who are dedicated to the study of Irish topics, and St. Mary's deserves great credit for that, for having taken up the challenge of pursuing Irish studies in a serious way here in London, here in Britain. It's a great contribution to the greater understanding of Ireland and knowledge of Ireland on the part of people who are within the St. Mary's community, and thank you very much for that. The three books that are being launched here this evening, I'd like to have written them all myself, but unfortunately I didn't have time. And I can tell you that Flann O'Brien, I say two things about Flann O'Brien. I was going to bring down my copy of The Best of Miles and read from some of the choice witticisms that Flann O'Brien came up with in that Miles Goblin column in the Irish Times. But I couldn't find my copy of Miles as I was leaving the residence this evening, so I have to. So you're spared that one. You can breathe a sigh of relief. But two things about it, about Flann O'Brien. One is that on one of the many meetings that I attended in the Department of the Environment, I discovered, to my great enthusiasm and joy, that the room I was in was the room that Flann O'Brien had occupied when he was an Irish civil servant. So there you are. I felt that was a particularly enjoyable meeting. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what the meeting was about, but whatever it was about, I remember it for the fact that it took place in Flann O'Brien's old room. And the second thing about Flann O'Brien is that I am the proud possessor of the collected works of Flann O'Brien in German, because a few years ago I was invited by Harry Rowohlt, who is the main German translator of Flann O'Brien. He's a great character. He's an actor. He takes part in soap operas and what have you. And he's a great character. And he invited me he was doing a full reading of The Third Policeman in Hamburg, starting at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It finished at 2 a.m., right? I, of course, agreed, like the person I am, to read the second chapter of The Third Policeman in German. Now, when we met before the event to meet with the other people who were reading, there were about 10 readers. The others were all either German academics or German actors. I was the only non-German speaker, and I had to read chapter 2 of The Third Policeman. So, shall we say, I spent an agonizing couple of hours with our consul general, our honorary consul in Hamburg, who is a German, who said to me, "But I've never heard most of these words. These are new words to me," because they were made up words, of course. So that's my little connection with Flann O'Brien. I have great interest in the theatre as well, and I think that the fact that we have so many great Irish dramatists is really a great asset for our country as well, because it means that all over the world, images of Ireland, visions of Ireland are being projected on stages all over the place. And I remember once in Berlin, going to we organised a production, or a dramatised reading of Happy Days, in order to mark the 50th anniversary of the first ever European production of Happy Days, which was in Berlin in 1962, just after it premiered in New York. And that was a great occasion, and it's led me to really enjoy. It's a line I use very often. Oh, that was a happy day for now. So today was a happy day for now, and I'm sure it'll be even happier when I hear the three speakers who will follow. And then finally, I have a great interest in Shaun O'Faolain. My MA thesis was partly on Shaun O'Faolain, and I had the privilege in 2000 of attending a centenary conference at University College Cork, my old alma mater, and also Shaun O'Faolain's alma mater. And I gave a talk on Shaun O'Faolain. So it's great to have Julie O'Faolain here, and to have Thaddeus O'Sullivan here to talk about the woman who married Clark Gable. So with that, I will again wish you all a pleasant evening. I look forward to hearing our three speakers, while I now hand the floor to Professor Lance Pettitt. Lance, thank you.
Your Excellency, honoured guests from the Embassy of Brazil, Vice-Chancellor-elect Francis Campbell, and the Interim Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Arthur Naylor, colleagues and special friends. It's marvellous to see this room filled this evening to celebrate this trio of titles from the Centre of Irish Studies at St Mary's University. My role as the director of the centre tonight is to act as MC for the rest of the evening. But before I say a few words about how the centre facilitates the research that leads to these and other publications, I would, of course, like to take the opportunity to thank the Ambassador very warmly on behalf of the University for the continued interest that the Embassy has shown, and the particular support that you've already given to the University in matters Irish at St Mary's. The lecture that the Ambassador referred to on Shaun O'Faolain a couple of weeks ago... No, sorry, that was Shaun O'Casey. Sorry, Shaun O'Casey, I beg your pardon, I stand corrected. On O'Casey, that's your second one that's coming up, I believe. The Shaun O'Casey lecture was very well received. I received a number of emails following the lecture, and we have recorded that, and it is up on Twitter, which is at CIS London, for those of you who missed it. I'm going to say a few words about the Centre for Irish Studies at St Mary's, and then I will introduce each of our speakers who are authors and editors very briefly. We'll say a few words. And then, of course, the finale of this evening is our reading by Thaddeus O'Sullivan of his memoir essay on the writing about the making of the film. the woman married half Gaelic. St Mary's is the oldest Catholic university in England. It was founded in 1850 in Hammersmith. And we can, in many senses, claim to be London's Irish university. This identity derives from the deep-seated links between Ireland and the capital that are historic and human and happening still today, not least in the fact that Francis Campbell, our elect Vice-Chancellor, is himself from Northern Ireland. So that link is very much still there. St Mary's is, for those of you who don't know, responsible for training generations of students, teachers, and producing other graduates in many other degree subjects who've migrated from Ireland or are ancestors of people who've migrated from Ireland. St Mary's has many sports coaching links that include London Irish rugby training, GAA games, and of course the Irish Olympic team trained in St Mary's in 2012. Our chief cultural alumni include that man of letters already referred to this evening, Shaun, who taught in St Mary's in the late 1920s and wrote his first collection, Midsummer Night's Madness, in 1932 whilst at St Mary's as a teacher of English. And of course he features as a literary source in one of our books this evening. Indeed, we are showcasing research in Irish Studies at St Mary's tonight. CIS, Centre for Irish Studies, was founded by Jim O'Hara back in the early 1990s, and it has become the leading Irish Studies institution in London. Now, what's the basis for that bold claim? Let me just summarise about half a dozen things to let you know of the activities and achievements. In the coming year, CIS will publish 3 monographs, a critical edition of a memoir, a new DVD, which is I've just seen the proofs of the cover for, and continue in our output of scholarly essays. Now, what distinguishes us from certain provincial Russell Group Institutes of Irish Studies that are newcomers to the capital? Well, it is the fact that we are well established and have an integral set of relationships with community and cultural organisations in this capital city, like the Irish Cultural Centre from Hammersmith, who are represented here tonight, where we've run conferences, London Irish, co-organised parts of the London Irish Film Festival. Thank you, Kelly O'Connor. And we also have an upcoming lecture series on Ireland and its links and connections to the World War I, organised chiefly by Ivan Gibbons. And we have close ties with the All-Party Committee on the Irish in Britain. Mary Hickman and Keith Hopper, who are here tonight, have spoken in that forum. We also host the Shaun O'Casey website, Drummings, edited by Michelle Paul, who's with us tonight. And we hold the archive of the British Irish Rights Association, particularly in terms of their peace process papers. If there's anybody that wants to do a PhD, come and see me afterwards. In the autumn, we'll be running a lecture series from October right through to December, featuring speakers in London like Claire Wills, Ian McBride from King's, but also drawing on speakers from Ireland itself, like Dr. Tina O'Toole. Our influence is also national and international. We have a collaboration with the Irish Film Institute in Dublin, one of which I've already adverted to before, which is a double-disc DVD of Thaddeus O'Sullivan's early films from 1974 to 1985, and a weekend film retrospective in September at the Irish Film Institute in Dublin on the director Brian Desmond Hurst. We also collaborate nationally within the UK. We collaborate with the Irish Arts Foundation, and they are represented here tonight by Chris O'Malley. And we are offering a one-day seminar in Leeds as part of their Irish History Month later this March. Our influence and impact spreads globally, as you'll see from the books that are being launched tonight. St Mary's has links with Sao Paulo, the Federal University in Santa Catarina, Florianopolis, and also with the Federal University in Bahia. And we've run film festivals funded by the Culture Island organisation on film retrospectives in Argentina and Brazil last year and 2 years before that. So we have a continuing set of publications that are coming out of Sao Paulo, one of which is one of the books this evening. So even from, I could go on, but I won't because I know the time is of the essence. Even from that short summary, I think you will agree with me that there is much evidence of our established position locally, Londonly, it's not those Flanner Bryan made up words, Londonly, and that we have national impact here and in Ireland, and that our collective endeavours embody the transnational dimension of Irishness that is the cutting edge of Irish studies today. Okay, I'm now going to briefly introduce each of our author editors this evening, who will say a few words, and then at the end of the formal part of the proceedings, we will be presenting the ambassador with a gift of each of the books to you. Okay, I'd first like to call on Professor Shaun Richards, co-author of a seminal text in 1988, Writing Ireland. He's the editor of a Cambridge Guide to Irish Theatre, and I'm very pleased that we are launching his book that he co-wrote with Chris Morash of Trinity College Dublin, called Mapping Irish Theatre. So please welcome to the stage Shaun Richards.
Firstly, apologies from Chris Morash, my co-author. As some of you know, Chris has just been appointed to the Seamus Heaney Chair of Irish Writing at Trinity, and while he was starting to prepare the booking of the flights, he looked at his timetable. He was teaching this afternoon, and he's teaching tomorrow morning. So, as he said, I wish I'd stayed in NIU, but he's at Trinity. Chris and I have done occasional conference papers together, but it was a few years ago, one evening, that we agreed that we ought to do something more serious and more substantial together. The fact that we had this conversation in Knochdoin's pub in Galway makes it very unlikely that we'd remember what we agreed, but we did agree, and finally we produced it. The result of a lot of sending of emails with attachments back and forth to kind of hopefully refine it, although Chris did say that he recalled receiving one email from me about a sentence in a chapter we were working on saying, this is me apparently saying to him, I've no idea what this means and I've no idea who wrote it. But hopefully there aren't too many of those sentences remaining. But in his absence, I want to thank Chris for being a great writing partner, but both of us know that whatever we brought to the book, it was improved immensely by that global network of interest in Irish studies that the ambassador has already alluded to. And global is the right word. And as one example, I was fortunate to be invited to the University of Sao Paulo in 2011 to teach on a course there. And while teaching there, while writing on the book, gave me a great opportunity to road test some of the ideas that finally we published. And in that context, it's great to be able to say thank you to one of the students, Maria Rita Viana, and to one of my hosts in Sao Paulo, Beatriz Copches Bastos, who not only is an academic, but also the producer of the company Cialudens in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, which specializes in the translation and production of Irish plays. There are many other people, too many people to thank now. Hopefully we acknowledge them adequately in the book, in the acknowledgements. But the dedication indicates our greatest debt, and it simply says to Anne and Lucette. So thank you to them. Hopefully the book does what it says in the title. It reads Irish theatre through the theories of space and place. And we take the specific meanings of those two words, space and place, from the geographer Waifu Tuan, who argues that space is the unknown. It's the place of freedom, but it's also the place of threat. While place is inhabited, it's familiar, it's comfortable, it's home. Chris Morash is Canadian, I'm Welsh, but we both now feel that we are at home when we engage with Ireland. And here in this part of Ireland in London, I want to express on Chris and my behalf our gratitude to His Excellency, Ambassador Daniel Mulhall, for his generosity in hosting this event this evening. I was lucky enough to be at the lecture that's been alluded to that the ambassador gave at St Mary's on Shaun O'Casey. So I know that he does share our passion for Irish theatre, and hope that when he does find adequate space and place, he'll be able to enjoy his copy of the book.
Thank you, Shaun. And now, moving swiftly on, I'd like to introduce and ask to come to the podium Dr. Keith Hopper, editor of the short fiction of Flann O'Brien and a self-proclaimed and very proud flaneur. Please come to the stage.
Thank you, Lance. Mr. Ambassador, Mrs. Mulhall, thank you for inviting me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. I'd actually like to take the opportunity to plug 2 new books, if I may. I hadn't told Lance about this, but he won't mind. The first of these is actually a special, to keep the global theme going, a special Irish issue of the Prague-based journal Literaria Pregensia, which I have here, which I co-edited with my friends and colleagues, Professor Andrei Pilny of Charles University in Prague and Professor Neil Murphy of Nanyang University in Singapore. Basically, the issue is devoted to the theme of neglected Irish fiction. And as we noted in our introduction, its primary purpose is to draw attention to Irish authors who deserve to be better known and to reconsider work that has been overlooked, forgotten, or undervalued. That's the official reason. The collection really has its origins in a conference I attended a few years ago with my co-editors, Neil and Andre. And as usual, when the day's lectures were over, we ended up in the pub, as you do, and we spent the night arguing about our favourite books and authors, as you do. And so this rather little book is a way of continuing that conversation, but it also constitutes the groundwork for, I think, a much more important project about why certain books are remembered and celebrated and why others, equally valuable in our opinion, are forgotten and ignored. It's a big question. We all know O'Casey and Joyce. There's a lot more that have just slipped out of public imagination. So the main advantage of this kind of restorative approach is that it invites contributors to step outside of the Irish literary canon and its attendant comfort zones. We don't need any more books about James Joyce, please. And to champion a neglected writer of their choice in a way that's passionate and scholarly. So the essays in this collection span a range of historical periods and novelistic forms, from the early 19th century to the present day. The opening essay, for instance, by Michal Macra, makes a strong case for revisiting the work of Charles Henry Wilson. How many people know Charles Henry Wilson? I didn't either. A wonderful comic novel called The Irish Valet, first published in 1811. It's really, really good. The closing essay in the collection is by the award-winning author Annie Proulx, who offers a writerly appreciation of Dermot Healy's great 1994 novel, A Goat's Song. To my mind, the greatest novel of the last 30 years in Ireland. Towards the end of her own reflections, Annie Proulx suggests that what makes any work of literature truly great is the depth of insight into the human condition, allied to a particular formal quality. A quality, Proulx says, that makes you rise up from your chair, go outside to look at the sky and give thanks, which I think is a nice formulation. The second book is Flann O'Brien. The short fiction of Flann O'Brien, which again I co-edited with Neil Murphy from Singapore. Neil and I have edited nearly 20 books between us at this stage. This was undoubtedly the most difficult and the most rewarding project we've worked on. Part of the difficulty lies in the fact that Flann O'Brien, or to give him his real name, Brian O'Nolan, wrote in 2 languages, Irish and Hiberno English, and also under a whole host of pseudonyms, not all of which have been discovered or confirmed yet. While all of this is part and parcel of O'Nolan's rich aesthetic, it remains something of a bibliographical minefield for scholars who struggle to pin down the most elusive of authors. So the present volume here contains 5 short stories translated from the Irish by Dr. Jack Fennell from the University of Limerick, 9 short stories written in English, the typescript of Flann O'Brien's final unfinished novel, and one new story from a previously unknown pseudonym, John Seamus O'Donnell. We have improved it, but we're fairly certain. We could be proved wrong, but if we're wrong, we've founded a school of Flann O'Brien. Some of these stories are reprinted for the first time and are garnered from a variety of sources, and I really can't begin to tell you the giddy excitement I felt late one night in the Bodleian Library in the depths of winter when the dusty archives suddenly yielded up 2 forgotten stories from the 1940s. Quite wonderful. And they are truly interesting stories. Given the complex nature of the project, this anthology is very much a collaborative effort, which involved the generosity and the goodwill of a great number of people, some of whom are here tonight. In particular, I'd like to thank Lance and all my colleagues at St. Mary's, who have given me nothing but encouragement and support. The redoubtable Dalkey Archive Press, who bring this literature back into print. They're represented tonight by Colin Neal, who's on the books desk. My friends and former students Donald McKay and Paula Tibe, who offer very useful commentary on some of the early stories. The artist Eddie O'Kane, who's with us tonight, another Strabane man like Flann O'Brien, whose very beautiful and evocative painting, I don't know if you can see this, of Flann O'Brien graces the cover of the book. It proves at least that you can judge a book by its cover. It really captures the essence of what we hoped it would be. So by way of conclusion, just to say that the primary purpose of the anthology was to gather together previously unavailable or dispersed material under one reader-friendly roof. But given the multiplicity of names that Brian O'Nolan used, or is reputed to have used, it's by no means a definitive collection. So instead, we offer it up as a kind of initial act of recovery rather than a completist project. And we're already planning a revised and expanded edition for 2016. The date just kind of suggested itself. So consequently, this present volume is an invitation to flâneurs, to give them their proper name, both seasoned and fledgling, to help us find more stories for the second edition and to help prove the provenance of some of the more contested stories. So if you do come across any new material that you think might be Flann O'Brien under some name, known or unknown, let us know. And we'll see you all here in 2016. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Keith. Vice-Chancellor Campbell, you're very welcome to, pleased to see you here this evening. Very welcome. We've moved from Strabane to a little bit further down from where you hail from in Northern Ireland. Moving on to, well, before we move on to our third book, Keith is saying you need to get up really close, like if you bought the book, you'd be able to see really close on his front cover. I would recommend the same thing. We need to sell these books. They're downstairs, on sale. The next book, The Woman Who Married Clark Gable, £10 for a screenplay, collected essays by eminent figures like Roy Foster, and the film of the book, if you like, is in the DVD in the back. A bargain at £10. Please take them away and when you leave. As I've held up this book, and before I just welcome Beatrice up, I need to say a couple of lines in Portuguese for our Portuguese speakers, Albie. Este livro é bilíngue, mas eu não estou. Now, funny enough, I got a big laugh in Sao Paulo. It didn't hear clearly. What I just said was, this book is bilingual. I am not. So for that reason, I hand you over to Beatrice Kopchitz-Bastos to do the introduction.
So, boa noite a todos. Correct Portuguese now. Então, boa noite, especialmente em português, aos brasileiros presentes. Obrigada. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here tonight and providing the opportunity for us to launch another volume in our series of multimedia publications. The publication of the series Ireland into Film, Screenplays and Critical Contexts is an academic achievement that was realized jointly between Ireland, the UK, and Brazil. The book and DVD we are launching tonight, The Woman Who Married Clark Gable, by Thaddeus O'Sullivan, is the second in the series. The aim of the series, edited by Professor Lance Pettitt and myself, is to publish the screenplays of a select group of outstanding films from Irish cinema, the better to appreciate their worth as works of art in their cinematic and cultural afterlives. The subject of the first book was the work of Northern Ireland filmmaker John T. Davis, centering on his film The Uncle Jack. The subject of the second, launched in Britain at this event, is the work of the Irish director Thaddeus O'Sullivan, and in particular his film The Woman Who Married Clark Gable. The subject of the next volume, In Line, planned for 2015, is still being discussed, so I can't tell you tonight. The series offers for each filmmaker a package comprising the screenplay of the chosen film in English, a translation of that screenplay into Portuguese, one copy of a DVD of the film, as just shown, subtitled in both Portuguese and Spanish, a scholarly introduction to the screenplay and the film, and essays by notable academics to close the volume. The aim of this double media approach is to widen the number of potential viewers and readers of those films. The introduction to the screenplay aims to explain its place within the career of the writer or director, to discuss it in relation to other works by the director, to assess its historical significance for Irish filmmaking, and to sketch the wider cultural context within which it was written, produced, and first received. Each screenplay has a preface by either the screenwriter or the director or someone closely involved with the bringing of that written text to life on the screen. Our translations are carefully produced to capture the spirit of the original language, but rendered into the contemporary idiom by experienced translators. And I would like to thank the presence of Maria Rita Viana, who is here representing all the translators that worked in the project. Thank you, Rita, for being here. To offer an additional critical context, we invite notable scholars to write essays that focus in greater detail on the featured film to complement the introduction and deepen analysis. In this second volume, those contributions have been made by Professor Roy Foster, and thank you, Roy, for your article and for being here with us tonight, and by Professor Annelise Corseio from the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. The central focus of O'Sullivan's film, with screenplay by Andrew Padman and based on the short story with the same title by Shaun, is on the contrast and correspondences between the content and imaginary world of the cinema, the social reality of that time, and the constricted urban space of the pre-Second World War in Dublin, pointing to the potential transformative and liberating power of cinema. It is a meta-narrative about cinema, and especially about how cinema can become central to the urban experience, and it's informed by the director's non-conformist attitude and by the narratives of his own life. Born in Dublin, O'Sullivan is also a long-time resident of London and presents his story in the urban setting of the Dublin of 1930s. Here, cinema illuminates the bleakness of a culturally conservative new Irish Free State, in which the protagonists, George, a displaced Londoner, and his Irish Catholic wife, Mary, see their lives suddenly changed after a night out in the cinema. Before finishing and handing over to Lance and Thaddeus, I would like to thank the Irish Embassy in London for hosting this event, the Irish Embassy in Brazil and the WBA's Chair of Irish Studies at the University of São Paulo for sponsoring the first two publications, and the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil and its press for hosting this series from now on. Most especially to you, Thaddeus, for all your generosity in the process of research and publication, and for going to Brazil in that memorable trip, to Professor, and finally to my co-editor, Lance Pettitt, and St. Mary's University for the great partnership and collaboration. Gostaria ainda de agradecer a presença da Embaixada do Brasil em Londres, as pessoas do Sr. Luiz Carlos Chagas e a Sra. Elizabeth Fiuza, e esperamos que a nossa série dê frutos dos dois lados do Atlântico e que estejamos aqui juntos muitas vezes. Muito obrigada. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Beatrice. Okay, now the introduction to our final finale speaker, the person you've been wanting to hear, Thaddeus O'Sullivan. I'll briefly introduce Thaddeus. I don't know how well his work is known. It should be better known, and this book is part of that process of bringing Thaddeus's considerable achievements to greater knowledge and examination. Thaddeus also embodies that generation of Irish people who left in the post-war period. He came here in the mid-1960s. He's been based in London ever since, making films and television programmes in the UK and Ireland and elsewhere since the 1970s. He deserves the recognition, as I say, that this publication brings to him. He's the recipient of many European Film Awards, the Irish IFTAs, and Golden Globe Awards as well in the US. Where is Thaddeus O'Sullivan's IFTA Lifetime Achievement Award? Where is his nomination for Ashdana? I put that out there for those people perhaps who have influence on these things. He is a key cinematographer of the Irish New Wave cinema of the 1970s, 80s. He has been also influential in British cinema and television since the 1980s and 90s with films like On the Black Hill and Channel 4 productions such as In the Border Country. His early film work from the Royal College of Art, from there to his pivotal short drama adaptation that we're hearing about tonight. It was BAFTA nominated and it starred Bob Hoskins and Brenda Fricker. And as I said, we presented in this double DVD and indeed in this book. Thaddeus is going to be having a retrospective at the Galway Film Flower later this year to launch the DVD from the IFI. His key films, if you want to look them up and buy them, are December Bride, Nothing Personal, Witness to the Mob, Ordinary Decent Criminal with Kevin Spacey, The Heart of Me, Into the Storm, and more recently Stellar Days. You will have seen this guy's work on British television and indeed on Irish television. He's done episodes of Single-Handed, Silent Witness, and more recently, and somewhat controversially for RTE, Amber. His forthcoming work for the BBC includes next month The Crimson Field, a film about, or a series about the First World War. And later on this year, I believe he's shooting Sebastian Barry's Secret Scripture. And he has another film, which I won't talk about, maybe he won't at the end, because it's still in process. But anyway, Thaddeus, I'm very pleased. It was quite difficult to get Thaddeus to write this memoir essay. But we got it out of you, and it is a wonderful piece of work which reflects on that process. And it's called Dreaming in Black and White. So I'll ask Thaddeus now, and if you would welcome him to the podium to begin his reading.
I can see Flann O'Brien lurking behind a curtain there, thinking, what are you doing here, jumped up man in the cinema in these auspicious surroundings? Thank you, Ambassador, for having us here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Special thank you to Lance and to Beatrice. Being the focus of their attention for quite some time now has been meant I've had to take myself very seriously indeed. Which, as my wife will point out to me, I never ever do. So she has to do it for me. I'm glad that the DVD is included with the book. I'd be so embarrassed to be talking about this otherwise. At least if you want to see what I'm talking about, there is an illustration. Clark Gable was the first film drama that I made after making many experimental films, mostly because I was afraid of actors, and so I worked on films like a painter, isolated and in control. But being afraid of actors and their power was the main reason I was slow to graduate to a more narrative strand of film. On The Woman of Clark Gable, I had two actors who at the time were considered a handful. I love working with actors, but they are from another planet, which is why I continue to work with them. Their sense of discovery is amazing. When I cast this film with Brenda Fricker and Bob Hoskins, I was very lucky to get two such wonderful actors, but also two extraordinary characters. So it was quite an entrance to that world for me. I remember the money that we offered Bob Hoskins, who was quite a star at the time, was so little. He said if we bought him a nice telly, that would do. What was the point, he said, of a small fee when most of it would go in tax? So we bought him a television. When he came to London for the film, we put him up in the Burlington, which was quite an expense for us. Bob had just finished shooting The Cotton Club and Brazil, so he was riding high. He was quite a big star then, and things in Dublin were a little quiet for him. And one day we got a call from the Burlington to say, we need to get around there quick. Mr. Hoskins was causing a problem. Bob apparently had thrown half of the room into the car park. At last, actors were doing what I thought they were supposed to do. Oh, was that pop stars. The other thing I discovered is that they love to take the piss out of directors. And that's the thing that never goes away. So you're never allowed to take yourself seriously. When I met Brenda Fricker to discuss the film, she told me that when she worked on a film sometimes, she didn't like the lines she was asked to speak. And if she couldn't get it cut, she said, she simply inserted a fuck into the line. And in that way, the director had no chance to use it. I saw her on The Late Show 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she was looking really fresh, and she said exactly the same thing. So I'm talking about 1985. And that is still hilarious. Anyway, if that wasn't a threat, I don't know what was. Anyway, black and white. It was unusual to shoot with black and white then. The move to colour was almost complete. Stock was hard to get, and most laboratories had stopped processing. Black and white film. But for me, this story had to be told in this way. The moment I read it, it was clear that that's how it had to be. People say that you dream in colour. Perhaps that's true for some. But I know that for me, my childhood is remembered very much in black and white. My memories of Dublin in the 50s are in stark black and white, and not, I should say, with any particular nostalgia for the period. In fact, photographs of the 50s that appear in colour are always something of a shock to me. Maybe that's how things looked, but that's not how I remember them. The pictures look artificial and painted, very unreal, and someone's fantasy of the city. This is just a paragraph from a Whelan short story. Mary lived in Dublin in the South Circular Road. A small red house, red terrace, small garden, near the old women's hostel, full, and Kilmainham jail, disused. She nagged her husband virtuously when she should have got drunk with him and poured her virtue down the drains. She went twice a week to the cinema, hoovered the house until she had all the piles sucked off the carpets, bought a new knick-knack for the mantelpiece every week, washed the dog, polished the windows, slept after lunch, read Chit Chat and Winifred's Weekly, went for a walk, and then sat around waiting for her husband to come back from the job. Dublin for me seems, as I said, monochromatic, a foggy, fumy blend of grey tones, moods of boredom and repression. Shaun O'Phelan's story felt to me like it was the Dublin I had lived in. The place, the South Circular Road, and the characters were very familiar to me. Ordinary working class Dubliners living with the tyranny of dull routine under the bullying control of the Catholic Church. Things that were definitely black and white were the uniforms of the clergy. As the nuns or Christian brothers bashed you about the place, aside from the pain, the strongest scent you got was a swish of the black soutane or a white veil, heavily starched. Hell, of course, was another matter. That was always imagined in the beautiful colour. That fiery image was for the future, of course, something to look forward to if you didn't get things right. Cinema was the other slash of colour in our lives, worlds of fantasy and escape. But the films that I preferred were the dramas in black and white. So when I came to shoot Clark Gable, black and white seemed just right. I thought it had an expressive beauty that would embrace the reality of the old working class Dublin, but also an abstraction from that reality. That is, the deluded dream of our heroine, Mary, as she performs in the soap opera of her own making. My films up until Clark Gable had been experiments in different ways of telling stories. I had, for example, made a film mixing a conventional narrative style with documentary type footage, mixing colour and black and white. The idea here, though, was to find a film style that was expressive of how we remember the past, how we alight on a memory and burnish it with our feelings about that time or period until the image is forced to become what we need it to be. In Clark Gable, of course, Mary's mind is occupied not with memory, but with fantasy and projection. But the use of black and white performed a similar role. In the film, as George's moustache grows, he takes on the persona of Mary's idol, Clark Gable. Unreality settles in, and Mary refuses to notice. George's frustration with her finally erupts when he smashes the crockery on the kitchen floor. By this stage, the broken crockery for Mary is a testament to George, or rather by now Clark Gable's, absolutely thrilling and passionate temper. She now is fully in the Hollywood drama of her own making. At a simple technical level, the use of black and white enabled us to cut seamlessly between scenes from San Francisco, the film which Mary watches obsessively, and the tidy home and husband that Mary is reinventing. But at a deeper level, the black and white seemed to me a way of honouring the peculiar transformation going on inside Mary's head. The working class housewife, desperate reality migrating into the territory of hope and desire. Marrying George, the Bob Hoskins character, a Presbyterian and an Englishman, would have been Mary's first gesture of defiance. It must have seemed pretty exotic. I remember that we always viewed Protestants as a cut above. To us as kids, they always seemed to have better holidays, better toys, better clothes, fewer children, and they were always the only ones on the street with a television set. Mary's marriage to the Protestant George would have set her aside. Some people would secretly admire her for it. Others would say she was rising to her station. Who did she think she was? As I see it, Mary's transgression is not just a desire for emancipation from sexual impurity, but also from the social stigma that's attached to aspiration. Anyway, it was all just a dream, only a film. A film of a dream swallowed by an earthquake. You have to see the film. By way of concluding, I should pay tribute to the fact that these quirky Dublin characters of the 1930s were brilliantly evoked by the two lead actors. Brenda Fricker, who plays the part of Mary, was for me the quintessential 1930s housewife. This woman who could only dream of pouring her virtue down the drains And Bob Hoskins, who plays George, got immediately the essential larkiness of the character. Very much Bob, and that is my memory of him. It was a part that my friend, the late, beloved Alan Devlin wanted. Sadly, I turned him down, of course. His comment when I told him I was shooting in black and white was the perfect put down, typical of Alan. "Jays, isn't that great?" he said. "Black and white." Thank you.
It repays reading, and it's in the book. You've all been very patient and very well behaved as an audience. I hope you've enjoyed meeting our various authors and editors. It only remains for me to thank you all for coming this evening. I would like to thank, of course, Jane Connolly and all the rest of the embassy team behind the scenes, making sure that everything works and that we're all seated comfortably. And again, to thank the ambassador and the embassy itself for such wonderful hospitality, which will continue, I believe, with the bar and with the waiters. So please stretch your legs, have a drink, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you for listening.